Hello everybody, SlimKirby here, and welcome back to another Mario Party minigame ranking video. And now that we are done with Mario Party Advance, it's time we move on to a handheld title that's a little more appreciated, and I can definitely understand why. Say hello to Mario Party DS. Unlike the previous handheld experience, this game is a little more in line with what you'd probably want and expect from a Mario Party game, as it's based more on the classic board and minigame structure and gameplay that we all know and love. And it's not just because the game had boards, but some really great minigames too. And with the use of 2 screens, touch controls, and even a mic accessory, that should lend itself to some excellent minigame production values, right? Well, much in the same vein as motion controls, it does vary a bit admittedly, but on the whole, I'd say the results are still more positive than negative. Anyway, for this list, I'll be looking at the 4-player minigames, the 1 vs 3 minigames, the 2 vs 2 minigames, the battle minigames, and I'll also be talking about the story mode boss minigames, as they're really not much different from the idea of boss minigames in Mario Party 9 and 10, just single-player based instead of multiplayer. I'll also include all 6 puzzle minigames in this list as well, even if 5 of them are just handheld recreations of puzzle minigames from previous installments. I promise this won't impact the rankings too much though, as even my favorite puzzle game of those 5 shouldn't quite make the top of this list, so there shouldn't be any too obvious frontrunners. As far as dual minigames are concerned, since there are no unique dual minigames in Mario Party DS, as all of them are just 1v1 variations of 4-player or 2 vs 2 games, they will not be counted separately from their initial variations, but I will mention them in passing if I feel like the dual iteration benefits them in any way. There are 73 minigames this time around, so we have quite a bit to sort through again, but as always, I'm up for the challenge. And lastly, I'd be a fool if I didn't mention the fact that this list is entirely my personal opinion, and that my rankings will no doubt be different than literally any other person in the world. So if something seems different from your list, or if I have one of your favorites much lower, please put the flamethrower down. I'm not saying my list is gospel or divine law, it's just my silly opinion. And if you think differently, that's fine. But you're not going to change my opinion, and I'm not going to try and change yours. So let's just let bygones be bygones in that case. Now that the formalities are out of the way, let's jump into the minigame rankings for Mario Party DS. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get this started. Number 73. Getting back to Mario Party basics, quite literally, it just wouldn't be a Mario Party title without a luck-based battle minigame. And to that tradition, I still say, why? Chips and Dips is this game's offender, and in this game, you and your opponents choose cards with numbers on them for 3 rounds, and each number you get gives you that number of poker chips. Whoever has the most chips by the end of all 3 rounds will win the game, and each round introduces new card numbers to really inflate the standings. In fact, the last round even introduces a Bowser card, which removes half of your current chips. You literally have no control over what happens in this game, and in a battle game, when your coins are on the line, it's never a good feeling, having your fate controlled by luck. Which is why this is a trope I've never been that fond of in Mario Party, which is why it once again gets the last place slot. Number 72, Cheap Chance. We have another luck-based minigame, go figure, and although this one is not a battle game, not to mention you only have 1 round to sit through and the game can have multiple winners, it's not as bad as our last place offender. But it's still luck-based, which means this is a game I would not take a chance on. Number 71, Soil Toil. This game just does not feel good to control. You and your partner team up to control a remote-controlled car where you both operate on one of the 2 front tires and must spin it on the touchscreen to make it move forward. You must do this in tandem with your partner so the car moves forward consistently and quickly, while also trying to avoid spinning it too fast on one side, as that will cause the car to turn more towards the slower player's side and away from the goal directly in front of you. However, it can be really hard to balance this, as there is no real meter to observe how your car is moving, so you kinda just have to get a feel for it alongside your partner, which can be really hard to do and manage, especially if the other team manages to have better luck with it. I even struggle playing this game with AI as well, as it just seems like the game has the ideal method for how you should move, but you have no real way of knowing that method yourself, which is kind of a shame and makes this game very unpleasant to play, at least for me anyway. Number 70, Trace Cadets. I think a lot of people expected this game to appear near the bottom, if not at the bottom by itself, and yeah, I just don't think this game was made very well. You have to draw shapes, mostly squares and triangles, on the bottom screen, matching the shapes and pieces on the board of the top screen, and the touchscreen is incredibly picky sometimes with what is considered acceptable. You have to draw these shapes perfectly, and I swear, sometimes even the smallest mistake will cause the game to reject your drawing and force you to start over again, and that can really cost some precious time in this minigame, especially when drawing some of the larger and more intricate shapes. Also, against AI, you really can't afford any mistakes whatsoever, and need to be moving at near light speed. I swear, the hardest difficulties are just nearly impossible to win against, because the AI just doesn't make any mistakes at all. Also, keep in mind that you can only draw the shapes that are highlighted on your board, the ones that will be adjacent to pieces you've already drawn. That can definitely throw you off if you keep drawing something that the game keeps saying is wrong, and you aren't entirely sure why. This game had so much potential, but damn, I feel like they messed this one up real bad. And it's a real shame that they did, because this could have been a solid showcase of the DS touchscreen functionality. Oh well, there'll be other games that accomplish this feat a whole lot better. Number 69, get the lead out. Hey guys, guess what? It's a button masher. Number 68, Cherry Go Round. It's a touchscreen spinner. Okay, I'll say a little more than that, because this is actually a unique variation of a button masher, but still, it's not really that much better. You have to spin your stylus around the touchscreen to get your cherry to fly farther than your opponents once the time is up, kinda like Bowser Toss in Mario Party 3 without the mashing and the stick angling. And while spinning the stylus is miles better than spinning a control stick around back in the days of N64 yore, I admittedly get very nervous playing this game because I really don't want to break or injure my touchscreen in the process, which makes me very uneasy while playing it and makes me wish they would have potentially done something else instead. Number 67, Boo Tag. It's a simple game of tag where players possessed by Boo are it, and you trade your possession around with the other players while the winner ends up being the one possessed for the least amount of time. The reason why this game is so low is because the player that Boo goes after first will have a huge disadvantage in this game, as they'll automatically be in last place and have huge ground to cover in order to get back on top. And whenever they transfer the Boo to someone else, it's so easy for it to just get transferred right back, letting some players get away scot-free for the entire duration. I think this game probably could have worked a lot better if it was just handled a bit differently, and maybe if the arena was a little more unique to compensate for how the game plays out. Otherwise, it just kind of feels like the luck of the draw can determine so much of how this one goes. Number 66, Rail Riders. Much like Cherry Go Round, this game makes me worry about my DS touchscreen, because you have to repeatedly stroke lines with your stylus on the screen to get more momentum and air for your jump. Let's just say, with how intense people can get with Mario Party, I think it's a very real concern. Number 65, Flash and Dash. Think of Flash Fright from Mario Party 7, but with the roles reversed and much more imbalanced. Like, I get what they were going for here, but I think it's so easy to corner the single player. And even though the single player does have a warning to let them know how close the other players are, sometimes it may be too late before they accidentally run into them. And I wouldn't say the arena is that huge either, so not a lot of room to hide if the team splits up effectively. Number 64, Track Star. It's like End of the Line from Mario Party 3, but structured as a 1 vs 3 minigame, which I guess that makes it more like Hide and Sneak and Hide and Go Boom instead. But either way, the 3 players choose a direction, hoping to escape the single player. The game itself isn't necessarily luck-based, as the team of 3 can actually try and outrun the single player if they happen to be good at button mashing, which ultimately makes this kind of unfair for the single player, since if they choose correctly, they don't really eliminate the player, they just get a chance to eliminate the player, which is kind of lame. Also, for the team of 3, It's a button masher. Number 63, Rubber Ducky Rodeo. This is a cute minigame, but not a fantastic one. The single player basically tries to move and tilt so the other players fall off their rubber duckies, and the team of 3 tries to balance so they don't fall off of the sides after each extreme motion. Balance has never really been my thing when it comes to minigames like this, which is why I don't have this that high on my list, but I don't think it's that bad to put it in the bottom 10 either, so I gave it a bit of a break. Number 62, Shuffleboard Showdown. Basically, a single player tries to eliminate the rest of the team type of minigame. Don't think it's that bad, but it does feel kind of like the team of 3 has it a bit easy, since they can kind of hug the top of the screen and get prepared for each of the upcoming chips. Also, some chips just fall onto the board near the end of the minigame, which I guess is a way to give the single player a last second chance at a Hail Mary victory, but it doesn't do enough to balance it, I think. Number 61, Toppling Terror. Naturally, when you have a system with both touch controls and microphone support, you'd want to try and implement them both for minigames, and although I do think the touchscreen has more utility in this game, there are some unique mic minigames as well. This one is probably the least interesting though, as you and your partner just try to blow over a womp onto the other team, and the side that blows the most air will be the winners. Success in this game will largely depend on not just your own air pipes, but also how well your DS system registers your blowing inputs, something that varies heavily from person to person and system to system, which can make this game a little unpredictable at times. Number 60, Big Blowouts. And the same that applies to the last minigame also applies to this one as well, although I think the variance is a bit larger here, and the game is more prone to mistakes. However, I do think the idea and concept is a little interesting, which is why I rank it just a little higher. The goal here is to give long, consistent breaths, so you can blow out as many candles at once and make more progress in each cycle. But again, depending on the state of your system's mic, not to mention how well you expel air, not everyone is going to have the same experience here, which makes it a little lacking. But when it works, it can be a decent game. Number 59, Cucumber Jacks. Another game where you must slide your stylus quickly against your touchscreen, but I at least feel like the movement here won't be as damaging to your screen, even though you do have to move quickly. You and your teammate must completely slice your cucumber until there is no more cucumber to slice, and you do this by stroking your stylus on the DS touchscreen quickly, but also thoroughly, since bigger strokes will cut out bigger pieces of the cucumber. You have to find the right rhythm for this one, and although I'm not super crazy about this game, I at least think it's done well. You just have to find the right rhythm. It can just be a little hard to do so. Number 58, Hammer Chime. It's our first boss minigame from the story mode, and this one is just really easy. It's basically just a game of Simon where you repeat the same pattern Hammerbro gives you a few times until he's defeated. That's really about it. Number 57, Hexoskeleton. This boss minigame is pretty much exactly like the previous one, although a little harder and a little more unique. It's still incredibly easy and practically free, since the game kind of gives you the direction and order you need to go when hitting the switches. You just have to be a little more proactive with dodging stuff. Number 56, Plush Crush. This is a really cute minigame, but I'd say only average overall in terms of quality. The team of 3 must drop plushies on the solo player in a claw machine-like fashion, but there is a bit of a delay in dropping the objects, probably to make it more balanced for the single player. However, the arena itself isn't very big either, so you might feel kind of cornered if you are the lone player, so it's kind of hard to determine which side I prefer playing as here. I suppose for the most part, it's an okay game, but nothing that special, I think. It is still really cute, though. Number 55, Rotisserie Rampage. This is quite literally Shock Dropper Roll from Mario Party 2, but with meat, and I think that's pretty hilarious. What's also pretty funny is that I actually prefer playing this game over its Mario Party 2 variation, but only because it's a lot less intense playing as the team of 3, because the meat doesn't spin as fast. Also, the solo player gets a little more control since they actually have to spin the meat themselves with the stylus and touchscreen. This probably makes the game almost too easy for the team of 3 though, but hey, I at least think this concept is a little more enjoyable and balanced now. Number 54, Power Washer. We're really making a lot of dents in the 1 versus 3 category, aren't we? Although, admittedly, this category is probably the hardest one to balance. This game is honestly okay for the most part. We've seen this idea many times before with the single player trying to eliminate all 3 players in a unique arena, this time trying to spray them off of a giant dinner plate. Honestly, this is pretty similar to the last game, just a little more balanced since a team of 3 probably has to do a little more to survive here. Number 53, Triangle Twisters. Here we have Mario Party DS's unique puzzle game, and the fact that it's below all the returning puzzle games is not really the best sign. But I will remind you guys that we are at least in the average to decent ranked minigames at this point, at least as far as my clarifications, so you can't really consider this a low ranking. Honestly, this is kind of an interesting concept for a puzzle minigame, but it's one you'll really need to pay attention to in regards to how you make moves. Frenzy mode is the general high score mode, while focus mode is more of a level-based progression, where your connections must be particular shapes that you must form. And although I'm generally someone who tends to move slowly and think about my moves before I make them, even in this game it can be hard to get a feel for the right movements, which does kind of impact my enjoyment here a bit. I respect what they were going for here though, and it can still be fun in its own right, but definitely not my favorite puzzle game. Number 52, Mario's Puzzle Party. I found it interesting that I had this as the lowest ranked returning puzzle game, because if I were to rank all the returning games in their original renditions, this one would probably be right in the middle. But I can't help but feel like this version of Puzzle Party is just kind of a cheap knockoff or something. The game just moves way too fast, and it's too easy to get a ridiculously high score without even trying. Hell, as tough as the Mario's Puzzle Party 600 achievement is in Mario Party Superstars, after seeing this version of the game, that would get anyone foaming at the mouth if they have trouble with that achievement, seeing how quick and easy it was to get a lot of points here. Not a bad minigame by any means, but definitely a shell of its former self. Number 51, Peace Out. Gosh, it's Puzzle Central around here. Anyway, I was never really that crazy about Mario Party 5's puzzle game to begin with, so I didn't expect this to be that much higher. The single-player high score challenge is something, and does give this game a little more appreciation for me, but I'm still overall just not that crazy about how this game works in general. It's okay, but nothing spectacular. Number 50, Stick and Spin. I definitely feel like I'm making a case for myself for being the Stick and Spin Ultimate Defender, since I feel like a lot of people don't really care for this minigame, and although I understand why, I don't really think it's as bad as people make it out to be. Although, I feel like that's more of the fault of Mario Party Superstars achievements for this minigame, since the later levels are absolutely brutal. By itself, I think it's a pretty harmless puzzle game, and it's pretty unique with how you go about dropping and clearing your blocks. Not the best puzzle game, but middle of the road in terms of what is featured here. Number 49, Crazy Crosshairs. A 2 vs 2 team game that's not too bad, but it's one where you and your teammate really need to be on sync if you want to do well, as you either control the horizontal or vertical movement of your crosshair, or to be more specific, you control where it stops. One person will likely press the button first to at very least lock in their position, but then the other person needs to be the one who takes the shot at the very end. Not only that, but you also need to do this before the other team takes the shot away from you, so you need to be not only efficient, but fast as well. Again, not a bad game at all, just not one of my favorites from this particular category. Number 48, Feed and Seed. It's an okay boss minigame, but it can go on a bit too long if you end up making a mistake. You have to avoid getting sucked in by the piranha plant, and then also avoid the bombs it spits back up at you, while also catching a bomb and throwing it back down into the creature's mouth. If you end up missing, like I said, you have to do the entire cycle over again, and if that happens, it just kind of drags at that point. Number 47, Bowser's Block Party. Now, there have been some awesome Bowser fights in previous Mario Party games, and there have also been some disappointing ones as well. This one kind of falls in the middle, but probably leaning more towards the lower end. Overall, I think it works fine, but it's just not entirely memorable. Plus, you aren't really even fighting Bowser either, just some block structures, which is kind of weird. Also, the hitbox for the final phase can be a little annoying and deceptive as well. It just kind of drags on a bit and isn't very exciting as a result. Number 46, Gusty Blizzard. An interesting concept that utilizes the two main features of the DS's bottom screen, the touchscreen and the microphone. One player blows cold air using the microphone in an effort to freeze the team of 3, and the team of 3 must stroke their stylus against their character to keep them warm and avoid body freeze. I know it might seem weird that I have this game a little higher than some of the others that feature both of these control methods, both of which I do find somewhat faulty in some respects, but for some reason I don't struggle with this one in the same way I do the others, and in a strange way I do think it's kind of balanced more than it would appear. I would probably prefer the team of 3 though if I had to pick one side, but I honestly don't mind being the single player either. Number 45, Soap Surfers. This game is an interesting take on the whole bumper balls formula, as you ride your bars of soap in a sink to push and knock out the other players. This game's one issue is that it does not last very long, and will likely end faster than the amount of time a normal person would be washing their hands at a sink. It's just so easy to get pushed out, and sometimes you may accidentally just push yourself out when trying to move around. It's a cool idea though. Number 44, Memory Mash. I love a good game of memory, but there's just a lot to pay attention to here, as both you and your partner try to make 4 sets of matches before your opponents do. You see the entire field, including the cards your opponents and your partner reveal, and I'm just trying to imagine the chaos that would ensue when trying to play this on local play, with everyone in the same room, screaming back and forth about which card to pick, and not knowing what your own partner has even memorized on their own end. Don't get me wrong, there should be chaos in Mario Party, but I just don't think it works for this minigame as well as others. I think I would honestly prefer that both teams just have their own unique board to play on, but as it stands now, it's okay, but not great. Number 43, Shortcut Circuit. A coin collecting minigame where you and your opponents travel across 4 lanes filled with coins, and you drag arrowed boards across the track to get your character to switch lanes and try to maximize on your coin gains. It can be pretty tricky to get a good payout on this game, because every player will be trying to craft their route all at once, and if you are too slow to the punch on one of your platforms, another player may get the jump on you and take your precious rewards. Also, if you aren't super accurate with your placement, sometimes the game will just not put the platform down, causing you to miss your chance. Not to mention you can also place a platform too late and have your character just ignore it. Because it's a coin game though, at least you'll likely be guaranteed something, but there are much better coin games here, easily. Number 42, Cheap Chump. Considering we almost got through half the list without another battle game, at least the developers are doing some good with this category. This is a very basic survival game. Dodge the cheap whirlpools of suction and be the last player surviving. The arena is not very large, and it's interesting how the 2 screens show different perspectives, one being 2D and the other being 3D, but with careful movement and monitoring, this game isn't too bad to do well in. It's probably just a little too easy, and that would be my only negative here. Number 41, Short Fuse. With how much I hate Mario Party 7's Balloon Busters, it's probably a shock that I don't have this game lower, but I think this actually does the don't be the player to activate the trap trope actually kind of right. You have to prevent the bob-omb from exploding on you, and you blow into the mic to try and stall the flame, while each player takes turns in the driver's seat next to the bomb, waiting until that fateful moment when the fuse ignites. Although it might feel a little luck-based, it's not inherently so, since you do have some control over your fate here, and it's actually a decent use of the DS microphone as well, since it doesn't rely too much on breathing heavily or fast, just normally. It can lead to players targeting other players though, which is a bit of a sore spot for me, but on the whole, I actually kind of appreciate and respect this game a little bit, for at least making a bad minigame type quite a bit better in retrospect. Number 40, Trash Landing. This game gives me some huge Pitfall vibes from Mario Party 6, my worst ranked minigame from that installment, but hey, at least this game isn't completely luck-based. There is a little element of luck to this though, as you may not get the rope you want. However, you at least have a chance to still win the game, which is all that matters as far as I'm concerned. Your goal is to try and land on the little platforms of trash after swinging on a rope, and some platforms are larger than others, so you really have to have your timing down, especially if you get stuck with one of the smaller platforms. Honestly, it's a really decent idea for a game, and it's nice that there's a safety catch if you don't quite get the rope you want either. Pretty fair and balanced in that, right? Number 39, Goomba Wrangler. This game is all about drawing circles on your bottom screen to try and collect as many Goombas as possible, and get more than your opponents, of course. You would think you need to draw big circles to try and get as many Goombas as you can, but you have to remember that your opponents are working on the same field too. So you need to focus on smaller, faster, and more compact circles in an effort to maximize on your gains, especially when you consider the fact that there are gold Goombas that give you more points and Bob-ombs that will decrease your score by half. You also have to make sure you complete your circles when you draw them, as even the smallest opening will erase your line and not give you any points. So while you need to go fast, you also need to be efficient and accurate as well. Number 38, Hot Shots. I will say, I think this game works better as a dual minigame than a 4-player free-for-all, and the fact that this can be a dual minigame is probably what saves it from getting lower on the list. This is a basic shooting gallery game where you must aim and fire at different targets, but instead of just using the touchscreen to click the targets, you have to treat the bottom screen like you are stringing and drawing a bow to fire at the targets on the top screen, while it gives you a crosshair to show where you're aiming at. It's honestly a unique way to handle this game, and I respect the decision for this, but as a 4-player minigame, there are just too few targets for too many players, and if you aren't fast enough, you can kinda get screwed out of getting a healthy number of points. With only 2 players on the field, I feel like the game gets a lot better, and can lead to tighter and more interesting matches. Number 37, Sweet Sleuth. It's a very simple game of look for the matching candy and click on it without picking the wrong one. You really need to pay attention on this one, making sure you don't get fooled by color, size, or shape, as some candies look pretty similar to others. However, for the most part, it's pretty simple and harmless and an alright minigame. Number 36, Shorty Scores. It's kinda weird how this is just a regulation minigame and not one where you can play a more full-length version outside of the main game modes like in other Mario Party games. But yeah, it's this game's sport minigame, I guess, and it's alright, I suppose. It's honestly kinda hard to keep possession of the ball in this, and as a result, kinda hard to score too. So a lot of the matches just end up being scoreless ties, or one side gets a lucky point out of nowhere and swipes up the victory. Number 35, Blockstar. I swear, the developers of the Mario Party series really love Puzzle Party, Blockstar, and Stick and Spin, considering the sheer number of times these games have returned in the series. Don't have much to say about Blockstar beyond what I've already said in the Mario Party 6 video. It's a pretty good puzzle game with a solid solo mode progression and multiplayer variation as well, and is arguably less stressful than Stick and Spin, which is what pushes it a bit higher on my list. Number 34, Airbrushers. A 2 vs 2 coin minigame where you and your partner press A to control the height of your vehicle and try to collect coins in the process. That's really about it. Nothing amazing, but does its job pretty efficiently and effectively. Number 33, Mole Thrill. In this game, you and your partner work together to try and get to the end of the course by digging through dirt and trying to escape a very angry mole behind you. You both press the A button to dig through the dirt, but whoever is faster to press the button will dig in that direction more while also moving forward. And you use this as a way to avoid rocks and other impediments in your path. It can definitely take some time getting used to these mechanics, but it works pretty well for the most part, and can be a fun game to try and optimize with your partner. Number 32, Book It. A 2 vs 2 game with a very simple premise and pretty easy controls. You basically just rotate around the face buttons in a clockwise fashion, kind of like how you do with Mario Party 6's Snow World. However, unlike Snow World, this game doesn't suck, and you actually pace yourself in a pretty controlled manner. Essentially, each player on the team must rotate around their buttons twice before it moves on to the other person, where they do the same thing, and you both repeat the process until you reach the goal. It's just a very nice cooperative exercise, and I kinda prefer this type of cooperative movement over stuff like Desert Dash and Dungeon Dash, if I'm being honest. Number 31, Penny Pinchers. I like to compare this game to Money Belts from Mario Party 4, but unlike that game, the Team of 3 has a very unique way to collect coins, while all the single player has to do is run into them. For the team, you actually use extending grabber hands to collect the coins, and you can only get them if the solo player misses them first. It's a really neat and silly concept, and although the solo player likely has the advantage due to having more control, I don't feel like it's as imbalanced as something like Mario Party 1's Coin Shower Flower, for example, so it gets a little more high marks from me. Number 30, Nothing to Luge. An interesting concept for not just a 1 versus 3 minigame, but also just in general and how the minigame controls and functions. Both sides slide down a hill structured like a snow luge course, and while going through the course you have to press the L or R button whenever you make a turn, pressing the button in the particular direction of the turn in question. The trick of this game is to master the art of the turn effectively and efficiently, as the smoother you take the turn, the less you'll slow down and the more time you'll gain in the opposing team. I admittedly had some trouble with this during my most recent stream playthrough, due to the very unfortunate state of my L and R buttons not being as clicky as they once were, which can make this game a bit finicky if your DS system isn't in the best shape. However, when it is working fine, the game does feel and control pretty well. Also, I can't help but feel like the solo player in theory should have the better time here, just because they won't have to depend on the other players matching their particular controller inputs. Overall, I'd say it's a good minigame. Number 29, Hedge Honcho. I honestly thought I'd have this one a bit higher, but I stand by my placement here, because it does require quick and precise touchscreen movements, and if your DS screen isn't in the best of shape, it can make going fast here a little difficult. The game itself is pretty cool though, and it's a very cute premise as well, as you and your opponents try to move a series of leaves out of the way to make it to the ending goal. While moving the leaves away, you'll also have to deal with ladybugs and bees that may be taking residence in the leaves in question, and in the case of the ladybug, you have to shoo it away, while for the bee, you need to hold still and not move any leaves until it flies away. These obstacles serve as temporary distractions more than anything, but they add an interesting layer to the game in an effort to make it so it isn't a total spam fest, which is something I do appreciate. It's a really great idea, just kinda held back by the fact that the state of your DS could mess with your performance here. Number 28, Crater Crawl. An interesting take on Mario Party 6's Granite Getaway, or other games that put you in a position to outrun and survive the impending doom. The only difference is that this game is more vertical than horizontal, and you must button mash to climb and use the D-pad to move away from erupting lava pillars. The game honestly works pretty well. I could maybe see the perspective of where you are compared to the lava being a little bit of an issue for some people, and of course the other players getting in the way, but I'd say those are minor impediments at worst. Number 27, Cyber Scamper. Kind of the same deal as the last minigame in terms of general goal, but I think the premise is a little more interesting. Plus, it's a platforming game, which I always appreciate. It is a little odd using a D-pad for this, but I've never felt like that ever hindered me to a huge degree whenever I do play this game. At least more than this game's main visual gimmick of the platforms lighting up and darkening out. Overall, I think it's pretty solid. Not a top contender, but I do enjoy playing it still. Number 26, Tidal Fools. Some could probably see this as a luck-based minigame because of positioning, but since it's a coin minigame, I'll cut it some slack. The idea is to wait for the tide to clear so you can grab the coins that wash ashore before the next one comes in. If you try to go too early, the water will stun you and cause you to potentially miss out on the next wave of coins as a result. It's about being quick to the draw, but also patient enough so that you don't get overzealous, which I do always appreciate that type of mindset in a Mario Party minigame. Number 25, Sprinker Scalers. This game always reminds me of Mario and Luigi climbing the pipes in Superstar Saga, and since this game did come out after that, who knows, maybe that inspiration may actually exist there. Anyway, this game actually feels more like a Desert Dash, or other minigames that require both players to work together in harmony with the same button presses. You both need to press X to ascend, or either A or Y to rotate right or left respectively, and you both must press the same button, otherwise you'll stumble and lose some ground. Unlike Desert Dash though, you don't have to be in sync when you do this. The game will just take the action once each player has pressed their respective button, so one player can afford to be a little slower here if they aren't sure which button to press. It's a really cool team exercise, really only held back by the fact that this game is incredibly short, and I honestly would have preferred maybe a slightly longer variation. That's just me though. Number 24, Call of the Goomba. I swear, Mario Party DS has a lot of really cute and creative minigames, and this is another one that I think really stands out in that department. In this game, you spin your stylus on the touchscreen to play your music box, and based on how fast you spin, it will change the general speed and tempo of the song that's playing. The more on the nose you are with the tune's correct tempo, the more Goombas you'll summon to your side, and by the end of the game, whoever has the most Goombas lured to their end of the field will win the minigame. It's all about finding the right tempo, and you can use the music notes on screen to figure out how well you're meeting that quota. And once you do meet that bar, it's about maintaining it so you can capitalize and optimize your gains to win the minigame. If you aren't good at maintaining that tempo, this can be a little hard to accomplish, but I find that nobody is perfect with this, so don't freak out if you happen to lose your groove on this one, as you can potentially get it back and still sneak off with a victory. Number 23, Soccer Survival. Kinda reminds me of the poker chip game from earlier, but now we have a 4-player free-for-all, or even a duel minigame if it gets chosen as such. It's a pretty typical survival game though, and pretty fun to play for the most part. Not the best in this game, but I think it accomplishes what it sets out to do pretty well. You really have to pay attention to how the soccer ball moves from the bottom screen to the top screen, and sometimes the transition between the two could throw you off, but as long as you stay towards the back, you should have plenty of time to react here. Number 22, Wampathon. Another survival game like the previous one, and interestingly enough, I think this one actually works better as a dual minigame than a 4-player one, just because the field is pretty small and you don't have to worry about the holes created by other players getting in your way when trying to avoid the Wamp attacks. But yeah, once again, just pay attention to how the big boys move and try to stay out of their paths when they're about to fall. Pretty standard game, but pretty effective too. Number 21, Pedal Pushers. Kind of a modified version of Slot Card Derby when you really break it down, but with less emphasis on turning and more so on how you generally accelerate. You alternate between both pedals to move your vehicle as quickly as you can, but along the track you'll find slippery surfaces that you'll need to slow down on just so you don't spin out and get stunned for a second or two. It's about speed, but also moderation too, which is why I like Slot Card Derby as much as I do in the first place, because moderation is usually what my opponents end up tripping up on, but not so much myself. But yeah, it's a pretty solid game. I just wish there were more course variations to compensate, or at the very least wish it was a bit longer. Number 20, Bob-omb Breakers. This was my runner-up for best minigame in Mario Party 4, and seeing how it's only 20th here, you may think that this means this minigame has lost a lot of favor with me, when I really don't think that's the case. It's just hard to really judge this one, because Bob-omb Breakers used to be a puzzle game with only a multiplayer variant, but now it has a single-player variant that's emphasized a bit more than the multiplayer one, so it's interesting playing this in a much different mindset than you would be the Mario Party 4 version. It's still the best puzzle minigame in Mario Party, and that's a hill I'm never going to come off of, and even this version has its own charm as well. In fact, I'd say this version actually got me to understand how to use the bob-ombs more effectively, something that was admittedly hard to do in the Mario Party 4 version, just because there were so many more blocks falling at once with 4 players on the battlefield. With that being said, I do kind of miss that chaos though, and I feel like the fact that it's only a side game instead of one of the core minigames does make it lose some of its original hype, I hate to say. Still though, this is an all-star minigame, and one that really should have been brought back in Superstars, or even Top 100. At least Mario Party DS acknowledged it at least. Number 19, Book Bash. Wow, Kamek, I can't believe you are outshining your adopted son and future king in the boss minigame department. This is easily the best boss minigame in Mario Party DS, and although I don't think it's quite worthy of being in the top 10, top 20 ain't too shabby. The game starts with you flying through a hallway to reach Kamek, flying on a book, Star Fox style, as you try to avoid the environment and keep your health in good standing before the fight actually begins. Then, when you reach the Magic Koopa himself, it's time to unload ink shots like no tomorrow, and take him down before he takes you down. Honestly, this game can be kinda difficult, especially if you aren't the best at minimizing damage before the second phase, as that will only add pressure to the scuffle since taking a loss will force you to go through the hallway again from the very beginning. However, like any video game, your subsequent attempts will generally be better than your first, so it'll feel more rewarding getting that redemption in the process. It's a pretty epic game, all things considered, and again, it's really weird how much this game overshadows the final boss minigame in doing so. Its only negative, perhaps the fact that it goes on a bit too long, but I feel like that's been kind of consistent with some of the other boss minigames too, so not a major point of contention or anything. Number 18, Parachutin' Gallery. This minigame reminds me of a game I don't really care for that much in Mario Party Island Tour, but this one at least has some very positive merits for me to consider. In this game, you and your opponent skydive and try to land on the instructed panels to get points. After 5 rounds, the player or players that get the most rounds correct will be the victor, and along the way, you can try to push and knock your foes around to prevent them from getting points, at the risk of potentially missing out on points yourself. Getting knocked around by other players is definitely a bit frustrating here, so you kinda have to play this game with a passive mindset, staying away from everyone and trying to sneak in at the very end of the round while the others are bouncing around. Honestly, I'm just happy that you have multiple rounds to work with here, and that you aren't immediately eliminated after just one fail, something I feel like could be the case in other minigames of this magnitude, including the Mario Party Island Tour game I mentioned earlier. As it is, it's actually a pretty solid concept that works really well. Number 17, Boogie Beam. A very simple premise that will require you to pay attention and focus pretty heavily on your character. Through the course of this game, spotlights will shine on the players at different intervals, and during these cues, if a spotlight is on your character, you must press the pose button on the bottom screen. Otherwise, you need to press the no action button instead. Each correct input will give that player a point, and the ones with the most points at the end will win the minigame. Very short, sweet, to the point, and a fun minigame to play as well. Also kind of a precursor to some of the rhythm games in Super Mario Party as well, when you really think about it. Number 16, Dress for Success. I think this game is pretty high on the list due to its novelty and silliness, as it's a pretty standard shuffle type of minigame. Cards depicting the lower half of all the player characters are shuffled around, and you must pick the card that correctly matches with the character's face card on the top screen. It's a pretty easy task to perform, and you don't have to worry about the other players taking the correct card from you either. What you do have to focus on, though, is that there are some deceptive cards that will try and fool you, where you'll have the right body of the character, but there is one missing or extra detail on the bottom card, making it an incorrect choice. So pay attention to those details, and definitely pay attention during the shuffle as well. Pretty par for the course minigame, but it does have some extra charm to it whenever someone has an incorrect answer, as seeing a character like Wario or Waluigi with Peach or Daisy's dress is quite humorous, admittedly. Number 15, Star Catchers. Incredibly simple, but absolutely beautiful minigame. Hey, I can't help it, I love stars, okay? Anyway, this battle game is very reaction-based. You and your opponents face off to try and claim stars as they appear by tapping them on the touchscreen. Whenever you claim a star, it'll turn your color and you will get a point. At the end, whoever claims the most will win. The game itself starts off kinda slow, definitely giving favor to those who are very quick on the draw, but the game really starts to speed up by the end, and stars will be popping up like none other. I feel like having good reflexes, while key, is not the end-all be-all for this minigame, as having good control and moderation for the endgame is just as important. Plus, since it's a battle game, remember that you're not just fighting for first here either, as second will still give you a nice consolation prize as well. Someone might be good at this game, but keep in mind that they pretty much need to be superhuman, almost on the level of tool-assisted gameplay, to flawlessly perfect this game. I do think it's a great minigame though, and one of the best battle games. Number 14, Fast Food Frenzy. I feel like this is a better version of Plush Crush, where the single player is the person in control, and the other players have to avoid the obstacles. And as the single player, you can actually move the obstacles pretty damn quickly with good control of the stylus and touchscreen. You are basically putting food items onto a conveyor belt, and not only do the other players have to survive for as long as they can without getting pushed off, but each of the food items has a different size and quirk to them that will impact the other players if they try to interact with them. For example, the shaken hamburger can't be jumped over, the pancakes will slow the other players down if they jump on top of them, and the fries will bump the other players around if they run into them. This gives the minigame a lot of variance and balance, I think, because normally I feel like the team of 3 would have the edge and run away with this one. However, in giving the single player all of these resources, I think it can actually be quite fun and engaging minigame to play for either side here, and it makes it one of the best 1 vs 3 minigames in the entire game. Number 13, Study Fall. Yeah, I kinda knew this one was coming, but only because so many of the GameCube titles had a game like this pretty close to the top 10, if not already in the top 10. At least for my list, anyway. Study Fall is this game's get as close to this point without going over minigame. You fall from the top of a chalkboard and you try to magnetize yourself to the board as close to the line as you can. And in addition to just general timing, having good memory of what's written on the chalkboard can help you determine how close to the line you're getting during your descent, which gives this game a nice extra layer of not really strategy, but just general understanding of your position when trying to figure out when to press the A button. You might still have to get a feel for it a little bit, as even I find myself usually pressing the button a bit early sometimes, compared to hard computer players, but it feels very rewarding when you can get scores within a centimeter or two, and those are definitely the moments I live for. Number 12, Raft Riot. I do like my aquatic vehicle games like Hydro Stars and Mad Props, and although I wouldn't say I like this game as much as those, I feel like this one definitely meets the same mark. Just drive your watercraft around the course and try to be the first person to pass the finish line. The controls are a little stiff at first, but definitely workable. And as usual, it's definitely the type of game I wish had some additional course variations as well. Not saying it needs to be its own separate game mode or anything, but even Slot Car Derby had multiple versions and 2 separate Mario Party tiles. Just saying. Still though, really great minigame. Number 11, Globe Gunners. My contender for best battle game in Mario Party DS. The goal is simple for this one, as you run around the map and score points by getting shots on your opponents. Kinda like Scooter Pursuit in Mario Party 8, but without the vehicles and motion control. Even though the arena is just a simplified map of the entire world, the space itself is still quite large, and it can be difficult to run into other players without peeking at their icons on the other screen to see how far or close they are to you. Also, while you can see famous landmarks and locations across the arena, representative of their real-world locales, the map itself is still quite bare and not incredibly interesting, which can make this game feel a bit bare bones at times. But functionally, the game works really well, and is a joy to play still. With just a little more going on, this could easily be one of this title's best minigames. Number 10. We're back in the top 10 yet again, and we're starting with a pretty fun 1 vs 3 minigame. In fact, this is probably the best 1 vs 3 minigame in the entire cartridge, because we have Peekaboo. In this game, you're given a specific boo to look for, one of which has a very distinct accessory, and you have to move your screen around and tap those boos when they appear on the screen. Whichever side gets the most boos will win the game. Now, you would think the team of 3 would have a very obvious advantage here, but when looking at the map, you can see that that is not 100% the case, as the single player has a much larger viewfinder, and therefore can see more of the arena at once, and therefore cover more ground at once. This strategy, I think, balances the game enough to be a very pleasant experience, regardless of what side you are playing on, and I tend to like when that is achievable by 1 vs 3 minigames. So, good work on this one, devs. Number 9. Although this won't be the top-rated 2 vs 2 minigame for this title, this is definitely a game that always comes to mind for me when it comes to Mario Party DS, and that game is Hanger Management. In this game, you and your partner are holding onto a hanger, and you're racing the other team to the goal line. Along the way, you and your teammate must tilt the hanger by moving to one side in order to dodge the obstacles, and if you put yourselves in the middle of the hanger, you'll go faster as well, since the object is centered and balanced, making this a pretty fun game to optimize. This also happens to be a pretty solid duel minigame as well, which removes the team aspect and just focuses on the movement for one of the players for both sides. It's a well-constructed minigame and always fun one to play whenever it comes up. Number 8. I feel this next choice is a minigame that probably shouldn't work as well as it does, but Twist and Route surprisingly is a minigame I really enjoy. In this game, you have to wind up your car on the bottom screen, and when you do, your vehicle will automatically accelerate until it runs out of juice, and you have to wind it up again. While it's moving, you have control over how you steer, so you have to navigate the course around the other obstacles and other players, and be the first one at the finish line. Like I said, you would think all this starting and stopping would get kind of bothersome, but I feel like this game actually controls quite well, and I feel like you can even employ some strategy by trying to stop your vehicle ahead of other players, or in the middle of narrow passages, so you could potentially get pushed a little extra distance forward. It's a real neat idea that works well, and I honestly wish there were some more course variations as well, as this could easily be a contender for the top spot if that was the case. Number 7. The only thing I have to say for this one is all hail platforming games in Mario Party. And this time, we have all geared up. You know I love these types of games, and we've seen some good ones in the past with what goes up and upward mobility. This one is probably a little more interesting though, as we're not just ascending to the skies, but rather trying to climb a clock with various shifting gears and platforms along the way. And in addition to climbing, we're also trying to race all the other players on the same playing field, which means you can also interfere with their own progress, and they can interfere with yours. That can admittedly be a bit of a downside, especially when you consider how small, horizontally speaking, this arena is, but thankfully there are a lot of moving parts to this game, quite literally, that won't make an early slip-up decide the final result. You still have time to make a comeback, I promise. Number 6. Mario Party 9's Peak Precision is probably one of the most simple but effective Mario Party minigames. You see a sequence of buttons in front of you, and you quickly replicate that sequence, making as few errors as possible. Peak Precision's only problem was that it was a bit too short. So, how about Domino Effect? Which is basically the same exact idea, but a bit longer, and probably a bit more punishing if you make a mistake? I can't really tell. Anyway, don't have much to say about this one, since I already said enough about Peak Precision in Mario Party 9, and it's literally the same exact idea. But I do give this game a lot of props as a nice, short and sweet reflex exercise that's fun to play as well. And technically, this game is even the precursor to Peak Precision, since Mario Party DS technically released a couple of years before Mario Party 9. I know it's not a major thing, but still, it's fun to think about. Number 5. I think because of the general scale of Mario Party DS, with all the characters being a lot smaller in these newer environments and everything, this really gave the developers a chance to experiment with a lot of unique minigame concepts and ideas. It's why you see stuff like running on cooking meat, riding on rubber duckies, hanging on clothes hangers, all kinds of novelties here. And although I wouldn't say this minigame necessarily fits that mold, it is a very unique idea. So for my first pick of this game's top 5, I have Camera Shy. In this game, you run around a corn maze with a camera, and you have to take pictures of the other 3 players. Once you get a photograph of all your opponents, you win the game, but you have to be wary of a few things. For one, each time you take a snapshot, you have to wait for the camera to recharge for a few seconds, so you can't just mash the A button and hope you get lucky. 2, you don't see the other players on the map, so you kind of have to get lucky and find them along the way, and you have to make sure you don't run into them when they're facing you, as they're trying to get your picture as well. So it can be kind of tricky to complete your objective. Still though, it's a pretty fun game and a really cute idea. I honestly wish there were other variations and fields you can play on as well, as the same cornfield can get a bit repetitive after a while. That's still a pretty minor complaint though. This game is still awesome. Number 4. I think a great aspect of having a Mario Party game on the DS is that you can take classic minigames that could be a bit awkward to play on console and use the DS's features to enhance the game in question, making it feel more authentic and that you have the controls right in the palm of your hand. And for me, I think Crazy Cutters from the first 2 Mario Party games is a great example of this, because lo and behold, this game gave us double vision. While not exactly a Crazy Cutters clone, the idea is basically the same. You're tracing the outlines of a character, and the game judges you on how well you trace it. The only difference is that it's a team game, and you're given different colored sections to outline based on your color. Now, I don't think Crazy Cutters is necessarily a bad game or anything. Heck, I actually defend the game probably more than others do, but the grading rubric in Mario Party 1 can be a little finicky, and while they did fix it in 2, at the end of the day, this minigame just feels so much better to play, having actual control with your drawing utensil, and the touchscreen and the inclusion of a team-based mechanic was kind of a neat idea as well. Not to mention, if you finish your lines early, you can go back over your work and try to squeeze a few more points out of your art by thickening the lines in case you missed a spot. It's a really great minigame, albeit maybe a bit too easy against CPU players, but against human players, I can see this being a really tight competition. Number 3. The top 10 of this list had some very powerful 2 vs 2 minigames, but if I had to name a top dog, I'd probably have to go with the game Cube Crushers. This game gives a very strong Hotel Goomba vibe, at least in terms of how the game is laid out in a puzzle-based format. You and your partner must make it through the maze by punching ice blocks and opening doors with the red buttons at the end of each room. The ice blocks will slide around and cannot be broken unless you find a Starman item, so you have to strategically move around the room on both ends to get both players to the buttons and press them simultaneously to open the door and go to the next room. Although getting the Starman is definitely a strong play in this game, as that will break a lot of the ice easily, you also have to look out for a spiky ball that will freeze you in place, requiring your teammate to come and break you out. So it's a bit of a risk-reward going for the items so freely. Aside from the randomness of what item will appear and trying to get to the door open at the same time as your partner, there's not really much wrong with this minigame, and I really enjoy how well this one plays. Not only does it give me the vibes of another minigame I truly love, but it also incorporates the teamwork aspect incredibly nicely as well. It's a really, really good minigame. Number 2. This minigame admittedly came out of nowhere for me in my most recent playthrough of Mario Party DS for my Mario Party Friday streams, as I was almost insistent that this game would be my number 1. While I did ultimately decide to knock it down one spot, I am still convinced this is an incredibly strong showing for roller coasters. In this game, you race the other players to the end of the course while riding on a ball. Now, before you think this is going to have slippery bumper ball controls, you actually control this game with the touchscreen by sliding your stylus in the direction you want to move. You have to dodge other obstacles and other players as you're going through this track, otherwise you might bounce around and lose some time. However, I think it's actually pretty smooth with how this game controls, and being able to accomplish this with touch controls is actually quite impressive. I found it actually kind of fun to try and optimize this game and try to have a good time on it, and I could see some really fun matches taking place against human players as well. Admittedly, it could probably feel a bit brainless and too quick at times, plus again, not really any other unique course variations. But this game was really fun for me, and was honestly a game I kind of overlooked for a really long period of time. It may not have gotten number 1, but I was really back and forth on this top 2 a lot in the process of making this video. It was really, really that close. Number 1. Well, it was a hard-fought battle for the top placement here, and although I'm giving number 1 to a game trope we've seen a lot in this series, and even a couple of times in this entry, there's just something about Dust Buddies that I find incredibly charming, brilliant, unique, and fun. So yeah, this is basically another example of run away from this thing chasing you and try to survive in the process. We've seen this many times before with Skateboard Scamper, Cheap Cheap Chase, Granite Getaway, but I honestly can say for certain that the Mario crew has never had to deal with an actual vacuum cleaner before. While on the run from this vicious sweeper, you have to watch out for obstacles on the ground that will impede your path, each of which has a different reaction and effect with the vacuum in question. Buttons and balls will trip you up, dust clumps will slow you down, and while you can run on flat strips of ribbon and envelopes, if the vacuum starts to come into contact with that, you could get pulled closer to your doom in the process, so you have to limit your time running on those objects. Heck, even balls will rebound against the suction, so even if you manage to avoid it, make sure you don't get hit by the bank shot. It's just a really clever idea that will get you thinking on your feet for the entire minigame's duration, and I really, really like that. It actually improves on games like Granite Getaway, which, while already good games, only have one main obstacle to avoid, while this one has a couple and slightly different variations too, so it makes it a little more interesting for me. It also perfectly encapsulates the overall theme of this game, where again, all the players are shrunk down to tiny size, and naturally getting sucked up by a vacuum cleaner would be absolute nightmare fuel for that scenario. And for that, Dust Buddies gets my pick for best minigame in Mario Party DS. Well guys, it was great doing another minigame ranking list for you. Mario Party DS is a really solid Mario Party game and is very capable of standing alongside many of the other titles of the classic series. Even if it is on a handheld, it doesn't really hold back on the quality gameplay, and I think you can see that just from how great this list of minigames is. This was honestly kind of a hard ranking to make just because so many games are so good here, and I applaud the developers for still putting in some solid work for this series this far into the series' lifespan. After all, this was created alongside Mario Party 8 as the last Mario Party games Hudson Soft worked on, which means everything beyond this point will be in D-Cube. On the subject of playing Mario Party, I have actually been taking a bit of a break from it, at least on my streams anyway. However, I do want to get back into doing my weekly Mario Party streams very, very soon, potentially before the end of the year. I think I am just going to focus on the story modes this time around though, so I probably won't even touch a good number of the games. I think I might also do a few weeks of various other Mario Party styled games like Fortune Street, Pac-Man Party, Wii Party, or maybe even Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival. Not as complete playthroughs, mind you, but more like one-offs in preparation for Season 2 of the Mario Party Friday stream series. We'll see what happens though. And with that, I think I'm going to end this video here. I'm going to try and get one more ranking video for this series done before the end of the year, which means next up we'll have Mario Party Island Tour, the first of the 3DS era of games. So stay tuned for that in either November or December. This has been SlimKirby, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Later folks, and always remember to party on. Dang it! This was so close to being under an hour. Oh well, had to happen at some point.